Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill, Gilbert Arenas, Derrick Rose. Over the decades, there have been many NBA stars who catapulted into success very early into their careers. However, their drastic fall happened so fast. Whether it's injuries or off-court issues, those players were not able to maintain their success for that long. But what if I told you there was a player who was an absolute stud, a 4-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA by the young age of 26? An incredibly versatile big man who became a pioneer for changing how the position is played. Unfortunately, his career fell off a cliff faster than you can blink. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today I'm going to talk about Vin Baker. Who is this man? You might have heard of him before, but what importance did he have in NBA history? And how did he fall off so quickly? Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Now, unlike most basketball stars, Vin Baker was relatively unknown for most of his life. He wasn't a childhood star, he wasn't a high school sensation, he wasn't really recognized by anyone outside of his small town of Old Saybrook, Connecticut. In fact, he only entered Old Saybrook's high school varsity team in his junior year. Before that, he enjoyed basketball but did not take it too seriously. So, being a late bloomer in high school without much of a resume, none of the huge Division I colleges recruited him. Instead, Baker signed with a lesser-known Division I college, the Hartford Hawks, who offered him a scholarship and it was close to home, so he quickly accepted this generous offer. It was here where he started to gain more and more notoriety, more and more recognition. By his junior season at Hartford, he exploded onto the scene, averaging over 27 points a game, 10 rebounds, and nearly 4 blocks. He had the second highest scoring average in the entire country. In 1992, Sports Illustrated called him America's best-kept secret. While he rapidly made a name for himself, the issue was most of Hartford's games were not broadcasted on national TV, which makes sense. As I mentioned earlier, they weren't a huge school, but the coaches and scouts who knew about him, they knew he was pretty damn good. For everyone who never got the chance to see him play, they were in the dark, completely unaware of who he was. To put this into perspective, this is what Paul Brazeau said, an assistant coach for Ohio State. Quote, "It's like turning back the clock, back to the 50s. If you want to see Vin Baker play, you have to see him live. It's like seeing Elgin Baylor or Jerry West in college. You have to go to the game. Only the people who were in the gym know for sure." This was also before the era of social media, so it's not like people can just look up his highlights on YouTube or Instagram or something. But for those fortunate enough to see his college games, they felt some kind of way about Baker. It was almost like he was an urban legend. The issue was, his team never had a great record in college. They never made the NCAA tournament in any of the 4 years he was there. So nobody got the chance to see him on the national stage. Regardless, he would finish his college career breaking the record for total points scored at Hartford. To this day, he still holds that school record, and his accomplishments there greatly improved his draft stock. In the 1993 NBA draft, a class filled with future superstars like Chris Webber and Penny Hardaway, the Milwaukee Bucks held the 8th pick. They drafted Vin Baker, a selection that was heavily anticipated by those who knew about him. As he started to get more and more news coverage, everyone got excited to see how this guy would do. And by his second season, he definitely showed up and showed hard. In a 4-year span, he would average basically 20 points and 10 rebounds a game. And this was during a time where the pace of the NBA slowed down drastically. Averaging 20 and 10 in the mid to late 90s was very impressive. Way more impressive than 20 and 10 today. His competition was fierce, but Baker stood out in his own way. As a 6'11", 230-pound big man, he was outsized by many other centers during that era, so he had to adapt and find his own niche in the NBA. Just something that would make him valuable in a different way, and that would be his shooting ability. For many seasons, he would shoot upwards of 45% from mid-range distance. That's a great percentage that was better than even the great shooters of his era. For a power forward/center, it was even more impressive. Very few bigs have utilized this aspect of the game before. Back then, we rarely ever saw them space the floor as consistently as Baker did. Some others I could think of are Sam Perkins and Rick Smits. But neither of them scored as well as Baker. They didn't have the full package like he did, because it wasn't just his spacing that made him great. It was his all-around arsenal, from his post scoring, his footwork in the paint, his aggressive rebounding, and good court vision. He truly had it all. On the downside, throughout his entire career, his teams never really got anywhere, the most success being the second round of the playoffs. From the Bucks to the Sonics, he was simply unlucky to play on teams that were on the tail ends of their heyday and starting their rebuilding phase. As an individual player, he was one of a kind. Sadly, by 1999, while we expected Baker to continue his upward trajectory, it all came crashing down before he really even reached his prime. Now, back in college, his game was a complete secret, but in the NBA, he had another secret that only few knew about: his heavy reliance on alcohol and drugs. In the best years of his life, he heavily depended on that to play well, and his addiction went unchecked. This is how bad it got. According to his teammates, there were times when the entire locker room would smell like alcohol even before practice. That didn't stop the Sonics from re-signing Baker, though. In 1999, they offered him a massive 7-year, $86 million contract. Back then, you only gave that money to stars, and he was a star, but he was showing signs of regression. Post-1999, the only bright side was he won a gold medal with the 2000 Olympic team. That was the only highlight for the rest of his career afterwards. Turns out, to nobody's surprise, that contract was a colossal mistake, as Baker never bounced back and continued his downward spiral. It was a tragedy. At this time, the suspicions of his drug and alcohol abuse was still under the radar. His teams knew he had some problems, but we didn't know how bad it was. He literally needed to be under the influence to play well, so that's a very alarming sign. It wouldn't be until 2003 when it was truly revealed how serious it was. After getting traded to Boston, the Celtics team doctor found significant signs of liver damage. By 2006, Baker was out of the NBA. This chilling excerpt from an article described what was going on. His substances of choice had multiplied to include Xanax, Librium, and pretty much whatever else he could find to help him forget what might have been. He spent his days, as he says, shuffling around an empty house, in slippers and sweats with a glass of cognac in his hand. He was, he says, skeletal. He vomited blood a lot. It was absolutely awful. To make things worse, he made over $100 million in his NBA career, but he blew it all by the time he retired. In 2008, his $3 million home in Connecticut was foreclosed because he couldn't pay the mortgage. A restaurant he owned also went out of business, and he was even forced to sell his Olympic gold medal. By 2014, he was seen working as a barista at Starbucks. While it's easy to say that Baker's life completely fell apart, for him, it was a new start. After 6 years of being sober, Baker embraced his new life and wiped out all the critics who said his career was a complete failure. Now, if you make over $100 million in your NBA career, even if you did blow all of it, he still had a lot of success. Baker became thankful because despite his addictions, he made it through. Not many people can say the same, because it usually ends very badly. Since then, Baker has been back in the basketball scene as a coach. He's coached numerous youth programs, and by 2018, he even became an assistant for the Milwaukee Bucks. Baker was a major part in their 2021 championship run, a huge help in developing Giannis into the player he ultimately became. The entire team has so many good things to say about him. So everything worked out in the end, and now he's back working in his passion. He took this as an opportunity to teach everyone, whether they were former athletes or poor kids on the block, that you could make bad decisions and lose everything, but still be able to bounce back. In a story from the Providence Journal, Baker said probably the greatest quote I've heard in a long time. For me to summon the strength to walk out here and get excited about retail management at Starbucks and try to provide for my family, I feel that's more heroic than being 6'11" with a fadeaway jump shot. I have to take the story and show that you can bounce back. If I use my notoriety in the right way, most people will appreciate that this guy is just trying to bounce back in his life. His life was a complete roller coaster. From being an unknown prospect to a star on the biggest stage, before falling off to drug problems and starting a new life and recovering, he turned himself around. After being told countless times that he ruined a great opportunity in the NBA, he motivated himself to create a new opportunity after the NBA. There's a lot to appreciate. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts and comments on his story. And what do you remember about Vin Baker if you were around back then? Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Peace.